Okay, so let's talk about the 3 dials at the top of the Brother XM2701 sewing machine. I labeled them so I did not forget: tension, stitch width, and stitch length. So let's start with tension. I normally keep mine at a 2.5. I basically use cotton fabric, so that's what works best. But depending on the fabric type that you're using will depend on where you have your tension at. And you always want to do a sample. So get a scrap piece of the fabric that you're going to sew and put it through to make sure that your stitching looks correct. So for your tension, this is what a 0 looks like on the cotton fabric that I'm using. You can see that it looks and is a little loose. And then if you move to a 1, it's not much of a difference. And then, like, I keep mine at a 2.5. When we get to a 4, you can kind of see that the stitching is more like a straight line and not like the stitching on these. Then if we go to a 5, I don't know if you can tell, but there's like little dots of the stitching on the back poking through. As we move to a 6, the fabric starts to pucker, and then it just puckers more when you get to a 7, 8, and 9. If you have skip stitches or thread breakage, you want to adjust your tension. So just play around with it and see which number or how much tension that you want on your stitching. You can adjust the stitch width for zigzag stitches and decorative stitches. The other thing that I use my stitch width for is to move the needle. So a 0 puts it all the way to the right, and a 5 moves it all the way to the left. Now let's talk about stitch length. A 0, you can see it's more just like dots, and I had to push my fabric through to get it to move. Then as we go along, the stitch length gets longer. So usually shorter stitches are for lightweight fabric. Mid stitch length is like general fabric, and then you use longer stitches for heavy fabrics and basting. That way the basting allows the stretch and it makes it easier to remove the thread. Now, if you bought your sewing machine new, it should come with this guy right here, and this is what covers your feed dogs. So you just put it into place, and then you can use it, if I can get it. Yeah, there we go. But it prevents the feed dogs from moving the fabric. Now, I have a label maker, so I don't do a lot of buttons, but when I do, I don't want to have to constantly Google the settings to make the button and the buttonhole, so I just printed up a label and put it on my sewing machine, which you can do that for if you're not constantly working with certain types of fabrics, but every now and then you are, or certain functions like the button and buttonhole. And I almost forgot, on your stitch length, you can change it all the way to SS, and that gives you all of these stitches. So that would be the purple numbers on the inside of your dial. Now, I am not a professional by any means. This is just what I've learned. And if you have scrap fabric, then I would just go through and play with it a little bit and see what works on the fabric that you're using. You can also Google what settings to set your tension at, or your stitch length or stitch width for certain types of fabric, and it should give you a good idea. But again, always test on a scrap piece just to make sure, because every sewing machine is different.